I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here, unraveling the worst betrayal of my life, but here I am. My name's Mark, and I've been married to Lisa for about 8 years now. We seemed like a solid couple, or at least I thought so. She was always the sharp one, quick with a snarky comment, a bit bitchy sometimes. Yeah, but that was just Lisa, right? Or so I believed. We had our usual ups and downs, but nothing that made me suspect anything seriously wrong. At least, not until recently. It started with small stuff. I'd notice her getting a little defensive when I'd bring up plans. She'd brush me off more often. She'd stay late at work, then come home looking a little too pleased with herself, like she had some secret she wasn't sharing. I chalked it up to work stress or her being tired. But then I started noticing her phone more, hiding it when I entered the room, deleting messages, and her behavior just got off. She'd start fights over petty things, then immediately get defensive, act like I was crazy for even questioning her. Honestly, I wanted to believe she was just stressed or tired, but deep down I knew something wasn't right. One night I came home early from work, something I rarely do, and I saw her phone lying on the coffee table unlocked. My first instinct was to grab it just to see if she was hiding anything. I know snooping's terrible, but I needed to be sure. I unlocked it using her thumbprint. She always kept it unlocked when she was home, so I figured, what's the harm? That's when I saw it. Texts, pictures, flirty messages with someone named Jax. And it wasn't just friendly banter. It was the kind of stuff that made my stomach turn, the kind of messages you'd never want to see your wife sending to anyone, let alone someone she was supposedly just pretending to be friendly with. I scrolled through them, trying to deny what I saw. It was obvious. They'd been talking for months, maybe longer. The messages quickly turned explicit. I saw photos of her in bed with him, her body pressed against his, her lips half open, apparently caught up in some kind of fantasy. My heart pounded. The worst part, I could see from the timestamps that these exchanges happened during the times. She told me she was working late or at the gym. She'd lied so smoothly I almost questioned whether I'd misinterpreted everything. But I hadn't. I felt numb. At first I was furious, then I was just hurt. How could she do this? After everything. I mean, I knew Lisa could be bitchy and manipulative, but I never thought she'd cheat, never thought she'd actually cross that line. And I felt stupid for not seeing it sooner, for not realizing the signs. I never wanted to be that guy, the guy who finds out and then loses all faith in his marriage. But that's what I was now, sitting there with her betrayal staring me in the face. I wasn't even sure what to do next. Do I confront her? Do I leave? Do I pretend I didn't see anything? That's when I realized this wasn't just an affair. It was a slap in the face that everything I thought I knew about her, about us, was a lie. I spent the night tossing and turning, mind racing with questions I didn't have answers to. I kept staring at her phone, rereading those messages, trying to understand how she could be so cavalier about it. I mean, she was all sass and attitude, always acting like she was better than everyone else, but this was next level. It wasn't just some meaningless fling. It was someone she was actively lying to me about, hiding from me, cheating with. And not just cheating, she was doing it in the most blatant, disrespectful way possible, sending selfies, dirty texts, even talking about meeting up. Honestly, I felt like I'd been hit by a freight train. My mind kept flickering between anger and heartbreak. Part of me wanted to scream at her, to shake her and demand answers. The other part, the quieter voice inside, told me this was over, and I needed to think about what I was going to do next. I had to process all of this, and it was brutal. For hours, I replayed every moment, every sign I'd missed, every time I dismissed her strange behavior. I realized she'd been building this double life right under my nose, and I'd been too blind, or maybe too trusting, to see it. The next morning, I decided I couldn't keep silent anymore. I had to confront her. I wasn't going to let her get away. With this, I needed to know what was really going on. I waited until she was in the kitchen, making her usual snarky remarks, acting like everything was fine. I grabbed her phone, looked her straight in the eyes, and asked her, "Who is Jax?" Her face froze. For a second she looked surprised, then that bitchy smirk curled up on her lips. She played it off like I was just some crazy, jealous husband. "Oh, just some guy from work," she said, rolling her eyes. "Relax, Mark. You're overreacting, it's nothing." She threw her hands up like I was wasting her time, but I wasn't buying it. I told her I saw the messages, the photos, everything, and her reaction, that was even worse. She shrugged, gave me a dismissive look and said, "So what if I talk to someone? It doesn't mean anything, you're so insecure." I could see her eyes flicker with annoyance, that air of superiority she always carried when she was trying to brush things off. But I knew better. I knew that lie. I could see right through it. I felt my stomach tighten. My hands clenched into fists. I wanted to break something, but I kept my voice steady and told her she was done, that I deserved the truth and I wasn't leaving until I got it. That's when she started lying harder, throwing out accusations that I was paranoid, that I was just trying to ruin her life, like I was the one cheating somehow, not her. Her tone was bitchy, dismissive, like she thought I was some kind of jealous fool. But I knew better now. I knew this was real. I was starting to see all the cracks, all the signs I'd ignored, and I realized I was done being played for a fool. That moment, I felt something snap inside me. I was angry, betrayed, and honestly crushed. But I also knew this wasn't just about her cheating. It was about the fact that she'd lied to me for so long, broken the vows we swore to each other. I looked at her, furious and disappointed, and I finally told her I was done. I needed space, time to think. But I also knew I wouldn't be the same guy after this. Trust was shattered, and I couldn't pretend everything was fine anymore. Now I'm stuck in this weird in-between phase, wondering how I let things get this far, wondering if there's any way back or if I should just cut my losses and walk away. The hardest part, knowing that someone I loved or thought I loved had been actively betraying me for months, maybe longer. It's a crushing feeling, and I'm still trying to figure out how to breathe after finding out that my wife was cheating with Jax, and I had no idea. After the confrontation, things got even messier. Lisa, true to her character, doubled down on her lies. She started calling me paranoid, saying I was just imagining things, that I was insecure and jealous because I couldn't handle her being more successful or more attractive than me. Honestly, I hated her for that. It's like she couldn't even admit she screwed up, instead choosing to blame me for catching her. That bitchy attitude of hers only made me angrier. I wanted to yell, to break something, but I kept my cool, mostly because I knew that losing control would only make everything worse. But inside, I was falling apart. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. All I could think about was how she'd lied, how she'd betrayed me in the worst way possible. Her excuses, her dismissive attitude, they only made me feel more like a fool. The worst part was that I'd trusted her, given her my life, and she'd been screwing around with some guy from her work, Jax. During all those nights I was working late or out with friends. She'd been sneaking around, hiding her phone, lying about where she was. It was so much worse than I thought. Then came the sudden events that shook everything even more. I started noticing strange things. Her laptop logs showing strange activity at odd hours, new apps I'd never seen before, and her deleting more conversations than usual. One night, I decided to check her email just to see if she'd missed anything. That's when I saw her email exchanges with Jax, filled with explicit talk, plans to meet up, and even a detailed discussion about how to keep everything secret from me. I was stunned. I knew she lied about everything, but seeing the proof in black and white, that was a punch to the gut I didn't recover from easily. That night, I felt like I was living someone else's life. My entire world was crumbling. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind. I'd always thought Lisa was a smart, confident woman, maybe a little bitchy but loyal. Now I saw she was capable of deceit, manipulation, and outright betrayal. I couldn't sleep. My mind kept racing, replaying all the moments I'd ignored the signs, all the times she dismissed me, all the times I felt like she was hiding something but didn't want to admit it. Then, just as I was trying to process everything, she came home late again. Smelled like perfume I didn't recognize. I asked her straight out, "Who's Jax?" She looked annoyed, rolled her eyes, and dismissed me again, but I wasn't going to let her brush it off. I was done playing nice. I told her I knew everything about the messages, the meetings, the night outs. I told her I knew she'd been lying, cheating, and that I couldn't stay with someone who thought they could get away with it. Her reaction, she snapped. That bitchy smirk turned into a sneer, and she said, "You're overreacting, Mark. You're just paranoid. You don't have any proof. You're jealous because I'm better than you. Anyway, I was so furious I could have strangled her. Instead, I just told her to pack her shit and leave if she was going to keep being a lying, cheating bitch. I wanted her gone, but more than that, I wanted her to finally admit she'd messed up. But she didn't. She just laughed like I was some pathetic fool for believing I had any control or say. That's when I realized that this wasn't just a betrayal. It was an attack on everything I thought was real. I never thought I'd be the guy who found out his wife was screwing around with his most trusted confidant, all while working on some creepy project. Yeah, I work in tech, and I was involved with this thing called virtual immortality, a simulation, a digital replica of a person's mind after death, meant to keep someone alive in a virtual world. I thought Lisa knew about it, but I was wrong. Turns out she'd been messing around with my architect, the guy designing the simulation, trying to manipulate the parameters. She wanted to test the boundaries, maybe see if she could influence the digital him, or maybe she just wanted to see how far she could push me. The irony. Her affair was so intertwined with my work, with this entire project, I wasn't even sure if she knew what she was doing anymore. She was screwing around with the guy who was creating my digital afterlife, adjusting parameters, trying to minimize my emotional attachment to her replica. Like she thought she could somehow control the outcome even after she cheated. That was the last straw. I felt sick just thinking about how she'd used that whole thing to keep her affair secret, to mess with my head even after I was gone. She kept lying, kept acting like everything was fine, but I now understood that the betrayal ran deeper than I thought. It wasn't just about cheating, it was about how she'd been manipulating the entire situation, including my future, my digital existence, and her own fake morality. I realized I needed to think long and hard about what I was going to do next. That night I knew one thing for sure. My trust was broken beyond repair, and she had burned every bridge between us. The days that followed were a blur of anger, disbelief, and a strain. Numbness. I couldn't focus on anything except the betrayal. Each time I thought about Lisa and her lies, I'd feel this intense wave of rage mixed with an almost crushing sense of sadness. It was like I was mourning someone I'd loved but who had turned out to be someone completely different. The girl I'd married, confident, bitchy, witty, had become this manipulative, cheating, lying person. And I kept asking myself how I missed all the signs, how I let her get away with so much. I started digging deeper into her digital footprint, texts, emails, even the logs from her phone. I wanted to find out what she'd been hiding, how deep her lies went. It was almost like a full-time job. Then I found the real shocker, her involvement in the project I'd been working on, the digital afterlife, the simulation that was supposed to preserve my consciousness after I died. That's when I realized her affair wasn't just about cheating. It was about control, manipulation, and some twisted game she was playing with my future self. The logs from her relationship with the architect of the virtual immortality program showed her deliberately adjusting parameters of my digital replica. She'd been tweaking how much emotional connection I'd have to the simulation, trying to make sure I'd be less attached to her, more easy to replace or discard. I couldn't believe she'd go that far. She'd literally been meddling with my digital existence, testing how much she could manipulate my post-death consciousness just to cover her tracks in real life. What made it worse was her claim that she didn't mean for it to go so far, that it was just some experiment. Yeah, right, I knew better. She had been actively testing limits, trying to see how much she could get away with. And the worst part, the logs showed that she'd been collaborating with the architect, her lover, on these manipulations. They'd been adjusting the parameters to minimize my emotional attachment to her replica, planning ways to make me less likely to miss her once I was gone. That realization hit me hard. She wasn't just cheating on me, she was planning to erase my feelings, erase any chance I had of feeling connected to her in my own digital afterlife. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. She didn't want me to come back in any form. She'd been actively working to diminish my emotional bonds to make sure I'd be okay without her, so she could keep her affair hidden, so she could control her own fate in an afterlife she thought she could manipulate. It was sickening. I kept asking myself, how much did she know? Did she understand what this project really was? Or was she just too selfish, too stupid to see the damage she was doing? The more I looked into it, the more it became clear. She'd been playing with fire and she'd had no idea how deep the rabbit hole went. Meanwhile, I was left to pick up the pieces. I could see that her manipulations extended beyond just the digital project. She lied about her nighttime outings, about her contacts at work, even about her feelings for Jax. Everything was a web of deceit, spun to cover her tracks. But the digital logs, they were the smoking gun. She'd been secretly adjusting my virtual self, trying to weaken the emotional ties I'd have to her. All of that, her betrayal, her lies, her malicious tinkering, made me realize how much she'd wanted to control everything, including my death and what came after. I remember sitting alone in my apartment, staring at the screens, trying to process it all. My life had turned into some twisted game. I kept asking myself, was there any way back from this? Could I forgive her? Would I want to? The truth was, I didn't see how I could. My trust was shattered into tiny pieces. Every moment I had trusted her, every time I'd believed her lies felt like a lie in itself now. She played me from the start, and I'd been too blind to see it. In the end, I realized I had two choices: keep going, trying to repair what was broken, or cut her out completely and start over. Honestly, I was leaning toward the latter. I couldn't imagine spending another day with someone who manipulated my very existence, who played games with my memories, my feelings, and my future self. She'd betrayed me in the worst way, and it was going to take a long time to even begin to heal from this. But the one thing I knew for sure, no matter what I decided, was that I'd never trust her again. Not fully, not ever. The decision didn't come easily, but it became clearer with each passing day. The more I uncovered about her manipulations, her tweaking the parameters of my digital clone, trying to minimize my emotional attachment, and her collusion with the architect, the more I realized I couldn't stay. I couldn't live with knowing she'd been actively working to erase any genuine connection I might have in my after-death existence. The betrayal ran too deep, so I started planning my exit. No dramatic confrontations or shouting matches, just cold, calculated steps to disconnect from her, both physically and emotionally. I knew I had to be careful because if she found out I was digging into her secrets, she'd probably do everything in her power to hide or destroy evidence. I set up a secure way to access all the logs and data I'd uncovered, making sure I could keep a record of everything without her catching on. I didn't trust her anymore. Not one bit. One evening, I told her I needed some time alone to think things over. She rolled her eyes, but I made her leave. I sat in front of my computer, reviewing everything, her texts with Jax, her emails, the logs from the project. I knew I couldn't go back to the way things were. I'd lost that sense of trust, and honestly, I didn't want her to come near me anymore. I felt like I'd been played, used, and manipulated on a level I never imagined possible. If there was any hope of saving myself from her influence, I had to cut her out completely. I decided I'd take the logs and evidence to my boss. We had a team working on the digital Immortality project, and I needed them to see what she'd been up to. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about her deliberately sabotaging the project, trying to control my post-death consciousness, and manipulating the whole thing for her own selfish reasons. I knew that if I brought this to the right people, they'd see that she was dangerous, not just to me, but to the entire project. I had to protect what I'd worked on and, more importantly, my future self. The hardest part was saying goodbye to the idea of her, the woman I thought I knew. I had to accept that she'd betrayed me in every possible way, emotionally, physically, and intellectually. The woman I'd married was gone, replaced by someone who only cared about her own selfish schemes. I remembered those moments of happiness, the laughter, the plans we made, gutted by her lies and manipulations. It was like mourning someone I'd never really known. Now I sit here, unsure of what's next. I've severed ties, taken the evidence, and I'm waiting to see what happens when I present everything. I don't expect her to admit guilt or to even care. She's always been self-centered, manipulative, and bitchy, so her reaction is probably going to be deflect, deny, or worse, try to destroy the evidence. But that's okay. I need to do this for myself, to finally claim back some control over my life, even if I'm already dead in a digital sense. What I do know is that I've learned a harsh lesson. Betrayal cuts deep, and sometimes people will go to extraordinary lengths to hide their true nature. I trusted Lisa for years, and in the end, I found out that she was capable of things I never even imagined. The digital project, the simulation testing logs, all of it revealed her true colors. I don't think I'll ever look at her the same way again, and honestly, I don't want to. The pain is still fresh, but I'm determined to move forward no matter what comes next. I just hope others out there never ignore the signs, never ignore their gut feeling, because once betrayal like this sinks in, it's almost impossible to recover. In the days that followed, I kept my focus on compiling everything I had found, every message, every log, every deviation in the simulation parameters she'd tampered with. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was leaving behind a piece of myself in those files, a digital ghost of what I once trusted. When I finally handed everything over to the team responsible for the project, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. Relief because I'd finally taken action, dread because I knew this wasn't over. Nothing ever is when betrayal runs this deep. That night I sat alone, staring at the screen, reflecting on what I'd learned. Lisa wasn't just a bitchy wife. She was a master manipulator, a liar who played with my future, my memories, and my very existence. She'd been testing how much she could control, how much she could influence her own role in my digital afterlife. I realized her betrayal was just about sex or infidelity. It was about power, control, and her own twisted way of rewriting reality to suit her needs. In the end, I decided to sever all ties. I changed the passwords, deactivated her access, and made sure she couldn't manipulate anything from now on. I wanted her out of my life completely, even if part of me still felt the sting of heartbreak. I had to accept that I was never going to get her to admit she was wrong, that she'd played me all along. Instead, I chose to focus on repairing myself, on healing from this betrayal that cut so deep it left a permanent scar. I've come to realize that sometimes love and trust are fragile things. They can be shattered in a second by lies and deception. And the worst part, you never see it coming until it's too late. Lisa's betrayal taught me that even the person you think you know best can have a side you never expected, one willing to manipulate not just your feelings but your entire existence. I won't forget how it felt to be blindsided, but I also know that I have to keep moving forward. I can't let her betrayal define me, even if it's left a permanent mark on my soul. So now I live with this knowledge, trying to rebuild what was lost, trying to trust myself again. I learned that revenge isn't always about revenge in the traditional sense. It's about protecting yourself, reclaiming your life and your future, even if that future is now in question. I've closed that chapter, but the scars remain, reminding me daily of what I lost and what I refuse to lose again. To anyone reading this, trust your instincts. Don't ignore the signs. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them. Because betrayal can come from the most unexpected places, and once it's there, it can change everything forever.